Hey there, Paul. Hey, nice to see you.
Yes, this is George.
Yeah, how are you? How are you? It's been a great week so far. How about you? How are you?
Yes, it has been a good week. It's been a really good week if you're a fashionista or a movie buff, or even if you're not. It's been a really interesting week, hasn't it, with all the fallout from the Oscars.
Oh yeah, I really that word is something that's something that we are going to be discussing today. That interesting part of the Oscars. And what better way to introduce our topic for today? Again, we're going to be talking about, what really went on in the Oscars, and from a mental toughness perspective, what are our thoughts about it? And how can we learn from it? Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, how can we learn from it? It's a very, very interesting. A lot of people are talking about it. In fact, since that time that it went viral, it was just crazy. The internet blew
Mm.
up. But yeah, I mean, with probably this discussion, I don't want to delay it further. What are your thoughts about what happened, Paul? I'd really be interested because I haven't really spoken to you since then, since when it happened. But it would be good to get your thoughts on it.
I thought it was really interesting. I mean, it obviously livened up probably a pretty vanilla type Oscar ceremony. So, if for nothing else, it was really entertaining. But I think it does contain quite a few nuggets for us to talk about in terms of mental toughness. But my overview, and I've sort of looked at the video a few times, is that Chris Rock was standout in terms of his response. So I thought he was amazing, and I'm sure you'll have some thoughts about that, and we'll talk about that. Will Smith was really interesting because I think when Chris was talking about he made a joke at somebody else's expense just immediately prior,
Mm.
and then he obviously made a joke at Jada's expense. And Will initially was laughing. I don't know whether you saw that. And then he
Mhm.
must have glanced at Jada and saw that she wasn't too happy, which we'll come back to. And then the question is, he made a decision. Was it a conscious decision or unconscious decision to get on the stage? And then we had that sort of old Western style slap punch. But he had quite a measured walk to the stage, and then the punch, and then when he sat down, he seemed to keep going. Obviously, with quite a few comments to Chris Rock, and so there were various stages, which I'm sure they will unpack for Will as well, in terms of how calm or composed or was he or wasn't he,
Mm.
and where was his mental state for each of those sort of aspects. So I thought it was a really interesting, 10 minutes or so of entertainment for us to talk about. I mean, what were your thoughts? Were you watching it live, George?
No, I wasn't watching it live. I did see one of my friends post it in LinkedIn. It was already in LinkedIn. It was barely about an hour since it happened. It was in LinkedIn, and I was like, I was like really shocked. I mean, I thought it was a gimmick because obviously
Yes.
we know the
Yeah.
Oscars. It's not exact as you said. It's a vanilla, paint by the numbers exercise. Some people think
Mm.
has something to say about its integrity and all that, but um, apparently it was when I saw the video, it was real. It was real, and I felt that my initial reaction was wow. That was my initial reaction. Was just wow for a man to actually go up on stage, live television, and punch or slap somebody. It's just wow.
Yeah.
I couldn't fathom the idea, and even because we know we've been conditioned. I guess the word conditioned from the past when we see these kinds of things. I mean, maybe we've watched a lot of Godfather movies or mafia movies. People don't take revenge instantly,
No.
right? This was swift, and as you said, you know, 1 minute Will Smith was chuckling. He was like taking the joke okay, and then the next second he snapped and he went up stage and slapped the guy. And I was just wow. And you know what actually made me more was what it was, what really made me look in bewilderment, was Chris's Rock reaction.
Yes,
I
yeah.
mean, that was, I mean, for not for anything. I mean, even the pain, I'm sure with whatever adrenaline, a person can take that. If you have adrenaline, you're at stage and
Mm.
somebody slaps you. But in front of people, his industry, these people are like the movers and shakers of the Hollywood cinematic world and the international audience. For him to just stand there and be professional enough and take it as a joke as it is, I mean, props to the guy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. As in, I was trying to say, say to myself, and I did, I've been following the things around it. I've heard that interview with Jim Carrey yesterday, and Jim Carrey said, if that would have happened to me, I would have sued Will Smith for 200 million. And
Yes.
rightfully so, because apparently you've been humiliated. I mean, the word there, I guess, is you've been humiliated in front of your industry, in front of millions of people watching. And then the guy just went through and said that, this might have been, the craziest Oscar in history. And he just went through and presented the documentary winner. I mean,
It's interesting. You made the comments, and I know Kerry had mentioned that he'd been humiliated, but I felt he came out of it so well. This is Chris Rock, because everything you said, he was so composed, so calm. He didn't react at all. Or his response was just on with the show. And I guess as a comedian, if he's done quite a bit of stand up, he'll be used to getting
yeah,
heckled. He won't be used to getting punched in the face, I'm sure, but nevertheless perhaps he started to develop an element of his mental strength is that he will expect the unexpected, that he's conditioned himself to just be aware that when he's on stage anything could happen, and maybe that element of his mindset came through, that this is just another strange thing that happens, for him it wasn't necessarily out of the ordinary. But he was amazing, because he regathered his thoughts pretty quickly, and then introduced I think it was the documentary
documentary.
Oscar,
Yeah,
and
documentary Oscar.
and almost straight into it. And you're quite right, you could have thought, well, was that staged? Because it looked so natural, seamless, and it wasn't laden with the emotion it may have been had he been knocked over or knocked down, or there being blood, or he'd looked upset, or it almost looked staged, which when you said that, I thought, absolutely, I agree with you. I thought, well, is this just the Oscar organizers deciding that they wanted to try and liven up the proceedings by
Yeah.
by this? Because yeah, and Will Smith and Jada and Chris Rock were complicit, but that's obviously not the case as things have transpired. But at the time, particularly Chris Rock was just amazing.
And you know what, Paul? One thing I really wanted to ask, and maybe I could ask you, because you've been with clients, you've taught a lot of people, you've coached people, in terms of mental toughness. Um, you've mentioned one very, very interesting point that you made a while ago. Is maybe he's used to being heckled, because a comedian, definitely, and a comedian of his caliber with a lot of experience, and I'm sure, he started off. I mean, the guy is already like what, 50 years old, 50 plus years old, and he's been there for quite some time. I mean, I love Chris Rock. Some of his jokes are a little bit tasteless, but I like some of this stuff. Very spontaneous. I mean, these comedians are really good at what they do, and it takes, I guess, that interesting thing that you said a while ago is, that he might be so used to these things already that made him what he is right now, and that's why he's mentally tough. My question there, and something that's interesting, is it good for him or is it bad? I know I might be going too far, because and maybe, to our audience who's listening right now, it might be one step further. But the reason why I'm asking such, and bear with me why I'm asking such, is because two things came to my mind when that happened, and when he showed that composure, being so composed. One thing that came to my mind was, wow, this guy is amazing, amazing, props to him. But the other thought that came to mind was, what's gonna happen after this? What happens when he gets home? What happens after the Oscars? And I think that's where all these things in your head happens when you go home. I mean, after the limelight, after all the adrenaline rush, after all the spotlight, obviously something's gonna happen in between that and the next day. And that's what I'm worried about. And maybe that's the reason why I'm asking, what do you think, Paul? You know, uh is it just okay to be that way?
So it's a really good point you make, and I would liken it to perhaps if you're involved in a or in a near miss when you're driving your car, you often hold it together,
Yeah.
but then you go home and you reflect. Goodness me, that was so close. I was only a second away from being involved in a bad smash or something, and then you start to shake. And so you're absolutely right. Perhaps he reflected afterwards and went, oh my God, that was such a big moment. But I think that's part of being mentally strong, is that you are able to hold it together
Yeah.
for as long as you need to. And I think it's healthy probably to then in a quiet moment kind of let it go and contemplate it and digest it. Um, because if you are that strong all the time, it means really that you perhaps lack some emotion,
Yeah.
rightly or wrongly. You lack some emotion that you don't feel the emotion as most people would. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but if Chris went home and just almost really needed to feel emotional about what had happened, I would think that's okay, and it's probably pretty healthy too, because for most people they would. So, but I do think he just showed that composure that you would do with some great deal of mental strength. The other thing I would say is that he had probably 2 seconds or 3 seconds
Yeah.
or 4 seconds before Will Smith came on stage.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as though it just happened. He had that time to either to compose himself, which he did, or alternatively, he could have got the fight or flight kind of
Yeah.
adrenaline flowing, and he could have reacted in a totally different way. So I think also he must have a great deal of self-control and being able to think objectively about these situations that many people would think very emotionally about. And obviously Will Smith did in some aspects of that. So long answer to a couple of questions, and one of which I asked myself, really, I suppose. But to answer your question, I'm sure he did come off stage and go, "Wow, that was a big moment," and it
Yeah.
was. I only think he can come out of this looking better, looking dignified,
Oh
looking
yeah.
as though he handled it very well, because I think he did. Um, and I'm sure Will Smith will have a whole lifetime to reflect on, a couple of minutes of madness.
Couple of minutes of math. And you know what? Very interesting. Yeah, I really like what you said. At that point in time, there was that space for him to actually prepare for what's coming. And I'm referring to Chris Rock. There's
Yeah,
that point, and there were verbal cues. There were definitely verbal cues. He did say that, "Uh oh, King Richard
Yes.
coming on, and he already knew that, oops, I think I went too far and triggered this other guy. And maybe that's it, the flight or fight response. He was able to like put up a wall that,
Yeah.
I know what's coming.
Mm.
And that's good because he's able to now turn or transform himself to, hey, I need to be mentally tougher in order for me to face this, because again, we can't justify the actions. Obviously there was something wrong as well with what he made that joke about Jada, but again, there's so many ramblings about it. Some people defend it and say, maybe he doesn't know that she had alopecia. I didn't know that Jada had alopecia as well. And maybe this other guy took it so bad, he was just trying to protect his girl, and that's and he deserved it more than anything. But again, that's besides the point. I think what he did show there was pure class. And
Mm.
yes, you're correct that at one point he needs to reflect. Very good analogy on being in an accident. You feel traumatized after
Mm.
the incident, and somehow he may experience something like that. And I guess, in a nutshell, it might be good for him to also reach out to people and get support,
Yeah.
even if despite him being so mentally tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an aspect of mental toughness called intelligent emotions, and I think that's what Chris displayed, in that he was so self-aware that he was able to choose the emotions that he was going to use, and that takes some for most people some time and practice to develop. That you're not going to just react, you're going to respond in a way that you're conscious about rather than unconscious. So I think somewhere along the line he's been able to train himself, and as we said before, that might have come from his art or his profession of being stand-up comedian. But he certainly, in those 2 or 3 seconds, he very definitely made a choice. I'm going to act in a certain way, which is the way that mentally tough people think. They have these intelligent emotions, so that really means that they're in control, which is exactly what it was. Whereas Will Smith seemed to initially be in control, perhaps.
Yeah.
His walk was very purposeful. He knew what he was going to do, but he wasn't thinking about the ramifications, which I think everybody else was thinking, perhaps. But he seemed to be quite controlled, walking up, throwing the slap or the punch, walking back. And then I thought, almost as he sat down, then there was 2 or 3 outbursts when I thought he looked totally out of control.
Yeah, yeah.
That was he was then just off and running with his emotions. So Will Smith, I'm not sure what you think, whether he was out of control all throughout, or whether there were elements where he was perhaps a little more objective than others.
You know what? Thank you for that. And in fact, Paul, it was about my cue to actually say, hey, let's talk about Will Smith, because I think
Right.
this is something that's also equally interesting to talk about. And I guess for me, if you were to ask me personally, looking at the whole sequence of events, because I don't look at things, just from that perspective. I really look at the background and everything, even up until his acceptance speech. Um, I feel he's a little bit conflicted. I don't know. The word that comes to my head is conflicted. Conflicted or a little bit confused. Because apparently, as you've said, when before it happened, he was okay. He was laughing off at the joke, and then he snapped. And then for some reason or the other, there was this confidence in, hey, I'm gonna do this. I don't care. I may have
That's
lost
right.
control, but I'm confident in doing this. I'll approach this person. I'll do whatever I have to do to protect my wife.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
There's that confidence in there. But when he gets back, and that's where he went, all thug
Yeah.
lifestyle and
Yeah.
all that, and that's where he lost control. And I agree with you. I think that feeling there might have already been, it may be a mixture already of both confidence and guilt.
Mm.
Because I don't think a person, regardless of, you know, if you're going to be doing something to somebody, especially physical harm, at one point in time after doing that, there will be some portion of guilt. There will be some portion.
Yeah.
And I felt that when he sat down and he started doing these expletives, you know, he was shouting. um
Yes.
Apparently he was losing, it was again, it was losing control. But you'd know that, hey, this guy is like, you know, I think this has gone too far. This has really gone too far. He's lost control. And I think that that's a good label there, lost control. And interestingly enough, because he won the best actor award, and he
Yes.
was like, he did accept the speech and all that, he was crying. I pity the guy actually at that point in time when he was accepting that award. I was pitying him because here you have somebody who's hugely popular. I mean, well respected prior to
Mm.
this. I mean, I liked Will Smith. I like his
Yeah.
movies. In
Yeah.
one of the more, you know, he's even a poster boy for mentally tough people because of the movie In Pursuit of Happiness, right? And even King Richard, I guess, is
Yeah.
one very good example of you know, mentally tough people. But you know, very very popular guy, and then somehow during his speech he was like going everywhere. He's
Yeah.
talking about, he was talking about how he wanted to protect his loved ones, and then, you know, how things about love and violence shouldn't have a place in this world, and thanking Denzel Washington and all that. But it was just all over the place, and I felt that, you know, it might have been good to really see what was going on in his mind as well when it was happening. And I mean, to tell you the truth, even if Chris Rock experienced that physical part of anger and pain, I think what was more painful was to see Will Smith lose it over there.
Yeah. That's right. And it may have served him better in hindsight had he not won the award,
Oh yeah.
because people wouldn't have forgotten about the incident. But you're right. When he went on stage, it was a pretty long acceptance speech, and as you say, it wasn't concise or to the point or structured. It was really free-willing and unstructured, which was just an indication that he'd lost control, um, which, you know, which is a sign really that in that instance he certainly wasn't mentally strong.
What do you think, Paul, might have been a better reaction if I were to ask you? I mean, you know, we've seen both extremes. I guess we can't deny the fact that he was offended. We can't deny that. Obviously, that has to be acknowledged. I would be offended if but you know, knowing that it's a joke. I mean, I'm sure you've listened to Ricky Gervais do his
You
hosting, and
know,
that's worse.
it's
That's
only
even
taken us 30 minutes to talk about Ricky Gervais. I thought you might bring him up in the first minute or two, because he's been far more
oh yeah.
controversial, I think, than Chris Rock at Oscars. But anyway, sorry, coming back.
Yeah. I mean, we you know, if we look at his portfolio and then listen to his stuff, he's even his worse. I would have melted if it was Ricky Gervais, but that's besides the point. Again,
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
no. I mean, just a benchmark, because we talk about benchmarks, right? I love the guy as well, but looking at it, I mean, definitely has to be acknowledged. If somebody felt slighted, you know, it's okay for him to feel that way, right? Will Smith was, it was okay for him to feel offended. But what might have been a better reaction?
Well, I'll certainly come to that. I might also just ask a question. I wonder whether his reaction would have been different had Jada not been there.
There you go.
Because I think if I was in his position, coming into this I'm thinking a split second, what do I think of that? But I'm also thinking, what does my partner think of that? And how is she going to expect me to respond? And if I don't respond in the way that she expects, I'm going to experience some heat and unpleasantness, perhaps some anger from her for not doing so. So there might have been an element in Will's defense that from a mindset perspective, he's thinking, I do want to defend my wife, but maybe more of that's because he knows how she was feeling, because it's a medical condition and she's very sensitive, and she would expect him to respond in a certain way. How should he have responded? I think convention would say probably that you keep it. He would have kept it under control, perhaps, and he would have used the press or the media post the event and say how disappointed I was, and or we were, and it's totally inappropriate because Jada suffers from this medical condition, etc., etc., etc. But sorry, I should put a full stop in there, because that's the convention, that's the controlled, perhaps mentally strong way of doing things. But I do recognize that he perhaps wanted to make a statement, and he certainly did, that he wasn't happy, and that was a way to make a statement. So he I might be sort of putting him down by saying, well, he did what he did, but perhaps he was very conscious about what he was doing. And then that was probably my point. When he was walking up, he just seemed, as you said, very confident and clear about what he was going to do. There was no ambiguity there. And therefore maybe he was quite coherent in thinking straight when he did that. I don't know. So long answer to a short question. What should he have done? Maybe he should have just kept it under wraps. But perhaps nobody would have been talking about it in the way they're talking about it now. Well, they certainly wouldn't have done.
Yeah, I like what you said.
What would you think? What do you think?
Well, for one, I'd certainly agree with you, and certainly like what you said about what it might have been different if Jada wasn't there. It was really, I mean, I think that decision, again, it all boils down to a decision, split-second decision. He was enjoying himself, no doubt. It was a joke, and I'm sure we've seen all in the internet a lot of these celebrity roastings and all that. It was a joke, but then he turned his gaze to Jada, and then she was clearly not happy. And we know there is a backstory to that. We know that their relationship isn't really all that, hey, 100% really go, positive right now. So it's a way for him, could be a defensive mechanism that kicked in.
Yeah.
That that Adam and Eve complex, that hey, I'm gonna go out there and show you that I'm in full control of everything, hence I'll do this.
That's right, exactly.
But yeah, you're correct, because if indeed he didn't do anything, I'm sure it might have also blown up, knowing Jada was quite disappointed. To me, the reaction of a mentally tough person, again, as you said, a good benchmark might be, I'll just take it all in stride, probably come up with a press release that, hey, we were quite disappointed with what happened, But again, another part of me is saying also that, hey, we can only say this because, yeah, we know we're very conscious of not going over. But what about the person who's at that point in time very limited to options, especially in that moment? I guess a more negotiated response might be, he could have just shouted expletives. Yes, and could have just heckled Chris Rock during that point. He could have just screamed and say, hey man, hey dude, that's gone too far. That would have been a better response.
Yeah, absolutely. A more controlled response.
More controlled response. Hey, you still are able to get your way. You're still able to assert yourself that, hey, I'm having issues with my wife, with my kids, with my image. I need to get this out. But
Yeah.
I think that might have been a better way to go off. Just probably just you could have just screamed and say, hey, that's offensive. That's not right. She has alopecia. And
Yeah.
then end of story, I guess. And
Yeah.
then
Very good point.
Chris Rock
Yeah.
could have just said, hey man, I apologize. And at least, even if there was some buzz around it, I'm sure there will be. At least it wasn't as bad as where we are right now. Because right now the issue is very divided. A lot of people are saying that the internet, and how the way people would go. There's always, hey, just shows that he's a man. He can protect his girl. It's right.
Yeah.
Slap the hell out of somebody who's doing that. Be violent. And then on the other hand, you have your pure class act, which is Chris Rock.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very well put. I think I'd agree with you on that, because it's scandalous is probably the wrong word, but it is. It's everyone's talking about it for the wrong reasons. Whereas, as you say, had he just stood up and made a point, people would still have been talking about it, but they would have been talking about it for the right reasons. It perhaps wouldn't have been as divisive as it is now.
Paul, here's something. Here's some two questions I actually have. Interesting question for you. And I know, we've been like what 38 minutes already. So I tell you, this kind of things, time passes by because of the very interesting discussion. I have a question. If you were Will Smith's coach, what would you tell him? What would you make him do? I hate to put you on the
really
spot.
good question.
I hate to put you.
No, really good question. Because I'm sure we've been thinking that throughout. Now, is this advice post the event or
post the event? Post the event.
Well, two things really. He's got to somehow, which I think he's tried to do, show some contrition and sorrow, and apologize. And I think he's done that. And so that's probably not coming from his mindset coach. That's more coming from his publicity agent. And so that he's trying to do. But I would certainly talk to him about future events, because he's now a target and people may try and bait him in different ways, in different situations. So he certainly needs to, as a coach, I would certainly encourage him to start to become a little more mentally disciplined, because in the same way as we touched on Chris Rock to start with, he consciously or unconsciously has developed mental strength where he can cope with unexpected situations in such a way. And I would encourage Will to learn the techniques, which he can do through this, the mental toughness MTQ4Cs concept, for example. He just would learn to develop that mental strength to cope with such situations.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd probably think the same way. If you were to ask me what I would say to him, I think more than anything, what he needs to do is, first, before doing anything, you need, Will Smith, you need to get some clarity. Get some clarity. Get clear. What do you really want?
Yeah.
And because there's so many issues. I guess. Again, there is that image to protect. There is that celebrity status, and there is also that the money that they have, all the endorsement deals, multi-millionaires,
Yeah.
the lifestyle. But then at the end of it all, there is also a man who is experiencing pain.
Yes, absolutely. Well put.
So I guess, I think you're correct there. Let's take it slow, chill out and try to be clear first. And
That's
then
really good.
Yeah.
Really good advice, George. I think you're absolutely right, because he's also got to understand who he is and where he is with his relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good point, really good point.
I guess that would be a another way to put it. Just to
So,
for him to start.
George, are you going to phone Will or shall I?
I'm so, I hope he's listening at one point. I mean, not for anything. I mean, not there's this, hey, because you're Will Smith, man, you're a celebrity, but it's really more of, I'm more interested in, I guess it's really just that other half, because he's a man who is experiencing pain.
Yeah.
And that has to be really something that needs to be looked at, really taken into consideration more than anything. And again, I don't want to sound, too preposterous or too fatalistic about it, but we know Hollywood. We know what people do when they're faced with their demons. They turn to drugs. They turn to all these extreme things. And we certainly don't want that, because at the end of it all, again, it's still a human being we're talking about.
Yeah.
So good advice, Paul. Thank you for that. And lastly, what would you say to Chris Rock? What would you make him do?
I get him. I think he could write. He's certainly got a good chapter to write for his autobiography. That's a certain certainty. But I just pat him on the back and say, well done.
Well done.
You,
Very
you
good.
know, whatever you, the way that you thought through that experience, I thought you handled it perfectly. I can't think of him. Could he have done better? I'd be picky if I thought he could. I thought he handled it really well.
I
How
I,
about
I
you,
agree
Steve?
with you.
Yeah.
He there certainly, probably he can turn this one into something more positive for him. uh, Support a foundation for people who are physically abused or something. I mean, just turn it into something positive, because I bet, again, at the end of the stick, there is also a man experiencing pain, and we can't deny that he experienced pain and humiliation, and that has to also be channeled into good, into something more positive.
Well, being Chris Rock, he's got lots of material, hasn't he? Now,
Oh yeah.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure we'll see some Will Smith jokes,
Oh yeah.
and getting punched jokes, Oscar jokes coming up in his future
Oh,
repertoire.
I bet. Oh well, yeah. So yeah, great discussion, Paul. I think, uh, I guess, very good discussion. Being able to talk to you, being able to get your insights, being able to learn from you at this stage. There's so many things to still discuss. Hopefully, we have more of these discussions, and maybe, I guess, before we part, what do you have to say about this thing? Is there any learning that we can take away from all of this?
I think you've talked through today about being both Chris and Will being in pain at some point of time of another, and both of them perhaps got to need to respond in different ways. I think the key for this, and for most situations, is just using it as a learning situation to become even more self-aware about yourself and how you respond under stress and pressure. What exactly happens to your mindset, and trying to think through, well, what outcome would I have wanted in this situation if I was either Will or Chris, and therefore how should I have acted? How should I have thought? How should I have acted to get that outcome? And we can do that with the benefit of hindsight, but it's worth us thinking about that, because we're going to be in these situations, not in the Oscars, but we're going to be in situations perhaps where we're under verbal attack rather than physical attack in work situations. So we are all going to experience that as we'll receive it or give it, and so it might just be worth reflecting on how we would react or respond.
Excellent. Hey, thank you so much, Paul.
No, thank you, George. Really
Thank you
enjoyed
so
it.
much. Really good discussion that we had. Very interesting. And I hope you have a great week, and I hope our listeners, wherever you are, we hope that you're able to get something out of our discussion, which I'm sure still going to be a lot of talk in the next few days. But for me, I guess, the message is clear. Let's stay strong. Let's support each other. And I guess, anything that comes through, we'll be able to pull through.
Fantastic. Thanks, George.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it, Paul. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Pleasure.